Today on Hands On Photography, we're going to take a big step up in the product photography game, and it's just adding one more little element in photography to really just make this stuff shine. So y'all stay tuned. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Podcasts you love
from people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Listeners of this program get an ad-free version if they're members of Club TWiT. $7 a month gives you ad-free versions of all of our shows, plus membership in the Club TWiT Discord, a great clubhouse for TWiT listeners. And finally, the TWiT Plus feed with shows like Stacy's Book Club, The Untitled Linux Show, The Giz Fizz, and more. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit. And thanks for your support.
Hey, what's happening, everybody? I am Matt Pruitt. This is Hands On Photography. Hope y'all doing well. I'm unbelievable as always. Starting this year off right by getting right into a very, very fun and simple photography tutorial that's going to help, fire up those creative juices, just like we talked about on the previous episode, and get you out there just shooting some more amazing photography and sharing it amongst your family and friends and continuing to get better at this craft. Welcome to everybody that's catching us for the very first time on the show. Thank you for popping on over here and checking this out. Go ahead and subscribe in whatever podcast application you're using. I don't care which one it is. It could be Spotify, it could be Apple Podcasts, the YouTube channel. All of them work. So go ahead and subscribe right now and go ahead and tell everybody about the show by hitting the share options and the rating options and leaving the comments on the Apple Podcasts and ratings and reviews. All that good stuff helps. So go ahead and handle that for me. I do appreciate the support. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started with this week's episode. Okie dokie. Today we're going to talk about shooting product photography. Now, on previous episodes, I shared several different tips and tricks about shooting product photography, and they were pretty straightforward, not too hard, not too difficult. At least I don't think so. But the main thing when you're thinking about trying to get started with product photography, the first thing to do is to just shoot anything that's in your home, anything that's in your possession. It could be your favorite bag of coffee. It could be your favorite bag of tea. It could be, anything as simple as a coffee mug, or if you want to get a little bit more elaborate, how about your camera, your favorite gadget, or whatever it is, just something that you have on hand there in your home. You don't have to go out and buy anything brand new. I don't care if it's a cleaning product. I believe I even referenced using a cleaning product for product photography. It just doesn't matter. Just as long as it's something that you can get your hands on in the home and get it set up for the shot. So that was the first thing. Now, I walked through all of this back on episode 142 as we talked about shooting for different brands. And just walking through the concepts of what are brands looking for and understanding, their theme, if you will. When you see a product from a certain brand, their shots tend to have the same look and feel. So I walk you through that. Now we're going to take that information and look at episode 146, where I got some feedback from you all talking about product photography. And we spoke about just fine tuning the details, just checking out the little dust and scratches that may be on your product, making sure it's framed up properly. All of those little tiny details make a big difference. Now, we're going to take the information from that episode as well as episode 142 and really just step up and amp up the product photography skills. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and add one more element of photography into this, and that is long exposures. Now, I spoke about long exposures way back in 2021. I think it was episode, what does my note say? Episode 81. Mr. Victor will have that ready for us on the screen because you know how he does it. Episode 81, I talked about long exposure and exactly what a long exposure photograph is in a little bit more detail. Briefly, a long exposure photograph, for people that's just now catching this, is basically when you tell your camera to open up the shutter and hold that shutter open for a little bit longer than it normally would, allowing the image sensor to capture more light and be able to, brighten up your scene at that particular time. There are some advantages with that. Number one is you're able to get more light in so you can see what you're shooting. And then there's some disadvantages with that, such as blurring. If you're trying to shoot a moving object with a slower shutter speed, you're going to get a lot of blur on that. Now, is that really a disadvantage? It depends on the situation. Sometimes a little bit of blur could be used creatively. And that's what we're going to do today in this particular product photography tutorial. So what I did is I went and grabbed a set of speakers that I was sent a handful of weeks ago or a month ago. I don't know. I will actually have a link to my thoughts and review in the show notes about these speakers. These are the KRK Go Out speakers, but that's neither here nor there. So I just grabbed those and I set it up and said, okay, let's go ahead and shoot it. So what's my set here? Very, very simple. Again, we have one key light. I'm using a Stella Pro Reflex key light. That is a flash. You can use any flash that you want. I have a simple black background and I have a Lazy Susan, and I just set the product on top of the Lazy Susan. That is it. Now, again, if we were shooting flash photography, to be able to get more control of the scene, the main thing you have to do to get started is to get rid of all of the ambient light in the scene with your exposure. So go ahead and set your camera up to take that first frame and make sure that first frame is absolutely black, because that means you're not getting any ambient light in the scene. Next, you want to go ahead and turn on your flash and make sure it's connected to your camera, and then fire a shot with the flash going off. Now, the flash is the only thing that's lighting the scene because you set your camera's exposure settings to only capture that particular set of light. In my instance, most of the time, it's usually about f8 and a, decent ISO, somewhere around 800, 400. It just sort of depends on the ambient light and the light that's being used at the time. So what I'm going to do now is hop on over into Lightroom here on my computer and let you see what we're working with and just how we got that particular exposure. Okay, so what we have here is the particular set of speakers. Well, it's just one speaker. And again, it's very dadgum simple. Nothing to it. It's just, you can see here on the upper right of the screen, the key light just sort of kissing down onto it and lighten it up. I've already done some adjustments here in Lightroom just to sort of bring out the shadows and just show off the product. And I even did a simple crop. Looks fine. Doesn't look great. I mean, yeah, it looks fine. It's not, but it ain't nothing to really brag about. It's just sort of missing a little bit of oomph to it. Well, this is when it gets fun in using long exposure. We have this shot right here. This is so much better. Now, granted, yeah, there are some things that I could continue to do and clean it up, but you get the gist. This is a long exposure shot. Again, if you take a look at the set, it's still the same thing. I have one key light because you can see it just flashing right here on the upper right of the product. But then there's this green light going on back here and a little bit of green light happening right here on the pedestal or the Lazy Susan. How does that happen? Well, I could tell you. You can just get any type of light source and set the shutter speed to be something slow. In this instance, I was shooting at a 4-second or 8-second shutter speed. So that meant I clicked the shutter and it opened up and it stayed open for 4 seconds or 8 seconds. During that time, I took a standard little tube light. Actually, it's this tube light that's right back here behind me. Set it to this green color hue. And when the shutter went click to open up, I just waved this light around the product and stopped. And when the shutter closed, this is the type of photograph that you can get. Now, there's a little bit of a catch here because when you're working with light in a long exposure, you'll tend to see some little hot spots like right here in the scene. Notice this is a really, really, really bright spot of light there. Well, how did that happen? That's because while I was waving the particular light source, I slowed down at that particular point. Okay, so if you slow down in front of your shutter, it's really going to intensify the light in the scene. The faster you go, the more faded it will look. And this is going to take a little bit of trial and error when you're creating shots like this, because you're trying to figure out, okay, where do I wave the light first off? And then you need to figure out the speed of waving the light. And if you're too close to your camera with the light, that's going to make a big difference too. If we go back over here to some of these other images that I think are, misses, like this one here, this is cool. I could probably mask out the beam of light going across the front of it, but that's what happens when I wave right in front of the product during this long exposure, and I'm going a little bit too slow. Had I gone a little bit faster, the light would have been a little bit more faded out the way it is here in the bottom left of the product there. But this is a lot of fun. You can use any type of light source you want. I use the tube light that I mentioned behind me. You don't have to necessarily use a tube light. You can even use a smartphone. If you just grab your smartphone and set the main screen to like a color or anything like that, use that and wave it around in the scene. If you have a flashlight, you can use a flashlight. Any type of little spotlight source that you can easily hold in your hands and just move it around in the scene and get out of the way. Couple things to consider when you're doing this. Since you're doing a long exposure, I highly recommend setting your camera on a tripod. And I also highly recommend setting your camera to do a countdown with the shutter release, meaning if you click the shutter during a long exposure with your finger, you're going to vibrate the camera just a touch by pressing down on the button. So don't do that. If you can use some type of remote triggering system, whether it be the Canon Connect app or the Sony Connect app, that whatever your particular camera allows you to do remotely, use that tool. It's going to make a big difference because you're not going to get any micro jitters on that. So get yourself a tripod. We've talked about tripods on this show. Don't buy no cheap one. Get a tripod, mount it on there, and use a shutter release, remote shutter release option on this, and then just have some fun and experiment with setting up the pattern that you want to create with the different light. This can be a lot of fun. Pick your color, pick your light source, and just go at it. All right. Hey, that's it. That's easy to do, right? Your turn. Get on out there, grab yourself a product, grab yourself a light source, snap something and share them with me. I've been getting a lot of different emails from you all and with some great images. They are quite nice. So feel free to send your images over to me here at hop@twit.tv. That's our email address. Again, that's hop@twit.tv. And if you are totally fine with me sharing your image on the show with our other hands-on photography listeners, please say so in the email. I don't want to share these things without your consent. Okay. All right. That's going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you again so much for the continued support. Keep sharing the show out. Keep telling everybody about it, and just keep spreading the word to help grow this hands-on photography community. Shout out to my man, Mr. Victor, for making me look and sound good each and every week there in the edit bay. Thank you, my man. And folks, also, it's that time of year where we're doing our annual TWiT survey. So make sure you head on over to twit.tv/survey23 to do the TWiT survey, audience survey. So we know, exactly how we should cater and tailor our shows for you, the loyal hands-on photography listeners and TWiT audience. I really do appreciate that. And also a shout out to the folks at ACI for supporting the show as well. Okay, everybody, safely create and dominate, and I shall see you next time.
Hey there, I'm Micah Sargent from TWiT, and you may be asking a question. What in the world do you do if you want to thank that hard-working team of yours? Well, why not gift them a Club TWiT corporate subscription? Oh, and here's a secret. You'll be benefiting yourself too, because you will be able to keep your team informed and entertained with podcasts covering the latest in tech, so they'll always stay up to date. With a Club TWiT subscription, they're going to get access to all of our podcasts ad-free. They'll get access to the members-only Discord server where they can chat with fellow Club TWiT members and all of us here at TWiT, and exclusive shows like Hands on Mac, Hands on Windows, and the Untitled Linux Show. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit and look for corporate plans for complete details.